In my humble opinion, I think horror is a pretty underlined genre. Like you have like I think horror is a pretty great outlet for creativity if you're trying to be a filmmaker, because you can just set off your aesthetic. You can just set off anything you want. Heck, even with the kills, you can get creative. And I honestly think that if I wanted to make my first ever movie, it'd probably be horror. Like that's how great horror is, and I do think it's a great genre to tackle. But like studios, being big studios, wanting to get money, you know they, they make the whole move. They make the whole movies. They don't make them out of passion. Sometimes they're just trying to make it into a giant boob fest with blood. And then if the movie's profitable, then you know what that means. We get sequels and franchises. Like for example, Friday the 13th wasn't even supposed to be about Jason, but it made such a big success that the company wanted to make the whole movie based around the first movie's killer's son. And after that, we got a bunch of movies. Same with the Nightmare on Elm Street. It was just an unexpected masterpiece that Wes Craven made sequels about it. But there are some times whenever franchises steam down, whenever they start losing steam, and then suddenly they are dead or they just don't make any more movies. And so this is what I'm about to cover, in case if you haven't even checked the title. I'm gonna go around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 horror movie franchises that I believe are dead, either because they haven't been making any more movies, or just because no one talks about them anymore. All right. First up, we're gonna go with the most obvious contender, Friday the 13th, which I've already said it before, but Friday the 13th Part 1. I have to say, not a great start off to the biggest franchise in horror media. Like literally, whenever you think of horror, people are gonna say Jason Voorhees, because literally he's that big of an icon. So much big of an icon that he was like one of the years, like he was like the 80s big success. But then something happened. After Chapter 4, the movies kept on making less and less money. And then New Line Cinema had the great idea to make Jason Goes to Hell the Final Friday, which didn't feel like a Friday the 13th film, and they teased at the end that they were going to make a Freddy vs. Jason movie, which took them 13 years to make, like dang. But before Freddy vs. Jason came out, they made Jason X, which is Jason in space. And then they made the sequel to the ninth film after Jason X. So it is kind of confusing, because you're like, wait, isn't he supposed to be in a space station? And also, the last Nightmare on Elm Street movie was like a meta. It was like a meta movie where it turns out that Freddy was just that Freddy is just like an act they made the whole movies of Nightmare on Elm Street kind of like on a movie set, and it turns out there's like a demon that takes on someone else's fear, and then the actress who plays the final girl in the Nightmare films, in the first Nightmare film, has a fear of Freddy. So then the demon uses her fear of Freddy and turns into Freddy, like some sort of like a kind of Freddy. Yeah, it's very meta and confusing for me to explain it, but that's just what you got to know about Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So yeah, it is pretty confusing to follow up. Basically, what I'm trying to say is Friday the 13th has a very confusing timeline, and so does Nightmare on Elm Street. And after Freddy vs. Jason, it was a huge success for not just Friday the 13th, but also Nightmare on Elm Street. But Michael Bay's company, which I don't know what it's called, but I guess I put it somewhere in the video, remade the Friday the 13th franchise. And I gotta say, the 2009 Friday the 13th remake is actually a pretty solid remake, and it's actually my favorite Friday the 13th movie. Not the best, but just my personal favorite. But then after that, we got no more Friday the 13th films. Like right after that, like 2009, we have not been getting any more Friday the 13th films. Like we may have gotten two fan films like Never Hike Alone or Never Hike Alone in the Snow, but those are fan films, not actual Friday the 13th films. So we don't know when New Line Cinema or whoever has the rights to Friday the 13th are gonna make if they're gonna make any more Friday the 13th films, because as of 2023, from 2009 to 2023, there have been no plans for a Friday the 13th film, nor a series, nor nothing, nor a reboot, nothing like that. And Nightmare on Elm Street got that treatment too, where they had a big franchise. Like each film, even though it was a disaster, critically, it still made a lot of money until Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is the meta which is the meta movie, where it turns out all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, are just movies. And then in the real world, you got the actors who played in the original movies, living lives. But the final girl in the first and third Nightmare on Elm Street films, has a fear of Freddy, and then there's a demon out there who makes, projections of people's fears. So now there's a demon disguised as Freddy, but it's not actually Freddy. I think you get that. But after New Nightmare and Freddy vs. Jason, audiences had to wait 7 years for Nightmare on Elm Street movie, which is in the reboot made by the same company that made the Friday the 13th reboot and the Leatherface reboot. Yeah, shocking. And then after 2010, 13 years, we have not been getting any Nightmare on Elm Street content. No, not even fan films or fan series or nothing. There is no plans for no Nightmare on Elm Street movies or projects. Nothing after 2010. So yeah, this is a horror movie franchise dead because they're not just making any more projects based on that franchise. So yeah, Freddy, I'm sorry. I would love to see you in another movie, but I'm sorry, but we just have to, let go. All right, another dead horror movie franchise that's dead to me and probably a lot of people is the Insidious franchise, which I thought it was an alright horror film with the first one, but then the sequels, drag it down. It is a movie. It is a horror movie franchise where the first film was great, but then after the sequels, it just gets trashier and trashier and trashier. I don't even remember what The Last Key was about. I remember watching it when it first came out and completely forgot about it. The instant I stopped watching it. And now they're making a new film called Insidious: The Red Door, and I'm not even interested in watching the movie. These movies, they're I don't look forward to them. I haven't even this is a franchise I didn't care in the first place, and it's a franchise I will never care about in the future. Insidious does have a great concept for a franchise, but it just doesn't have the hook for me, And speaking of Insidious, how about Paranormal Activity, made by the same guy who made Saw and Insidious, James Wan, I believe. And this is the movie that kind of revolutionized found footage and then ruined it, because after the success of the first film, they had to make sequels, and then the sequels, are bad, and they started making less money, and then no one cared about it anymore, and then those movies killed the entire found footage genre until Haunted House came out and didn't revitalize it, just made it worse. So yeah, it is a Paranormal Activity. They're not making any more movies. They're not making any remakes or nothing. It's just dead because no one cares about these movies anymore. No one cares about found footage anymore. Alright, next up is just something that I wanted to add because I thought it was funny. The live-action Dr. Seuss movies. I remember the first Grinch movie starring Jim Carrey was released. The trailers were coming out, and I was scared because the Jim Carrey Grinch makeup looks so weird. And yeah, I ended up watching the movie, and I wish I didn't because the movie's very zany, very crazy, and comical. Jim Carrey, I think he's okay as the Grinch. I don't think he's like pitch perfect as the role. But I just don't like the movie. But kind of ugh. Yeah, they had ever since 2007, ever since 2007 after the Grinch film, there are no plans for another live action Dr. Seuss film because Cat in the Hat starring Mike Myers and How the Grinch Stole Christmas starring Jim Carrey are some of the creepiest things I've ever seen. And in fact, they are so bad that the wife of Dr. Seuss actually hates those movies and has said that after watching The Grinch, she does not want to see another live-action project based on the Dr. Seuss properties. That's how bad the movies are. All right, next up, what's next? Oh yeah, Alien. Who here was born in the year 1970? Who here was around 1979 and heard of this little indie movie called Alien? And no one knew how massive it would be because 3 years later, James Cameron himself directed the sequel Aliens, and it was one of the biggest successes of the early 80s as summer films. And then after Alien 3, the whole franchise started to die down. Alien Cubed, not a good movie. Alien Resurrection, not a good movie. And then they started making Alien vs. Predator, which wasn't good, but it did make a lot of paper, money. Yay, money. And then they made Requiem, which was just so dark I couldn't see a single dang thing. Like, I'm not joking. Watch them, like watch clips of Requiem and try to see something, anything. You will literally not see anything. And then after that, we got no news for an Alien film. I mean, there were the prequels like Prometheus and Alien Covenant, but after Covenant, I haven't heard anything of an Alien project. I did hear somewhere in 2020 they were making an Alien like series or something, or an Alien film. I don't know, under like Disney's vision, and they're gonna make it like PG-13 or something because Fox is now acquired by Disney. And I haven't heard about the project ever since. I'm not adding Predator into the list because it did come out with Prey in 2022, and to this day, my uncle wants me to watch the film, but I don't have money for Hulu, so yeah, does that. All right, for the last franchise, for this video, Anaconda, the one with Ice Cube. I haven't watched the first Anaconda, so I can't say anything about it. But I do remember watching the one where they're stuck in an island, they're trying to find some treasure or something, and it has Jennifer Lawrence, I think that's her, Rosario Dawson, and then like turns out one of the guys traveling with them is a plot twist antagonist of the film, and then he dies by getting bitten by a bunch of snakes, and they're like, haha, that was such a fun time, but yeah, and then they just leave the island, credits roll. But yeah, Anaconda, again, it was just one of those movies where it's like the first one wasn't a great film, but it was campy fun. And then they just had to make so many sequels to the point where it was boring, it was bad, and desaturated. And then after that, no news of a new Anaconda film, no news of any Ice Cube films, nothing. Just nothing. Anaconda, it just had 3 movies, I think, and it stopped. So yeah, this is my first, video where I actually use an editing software. I hope you guys actually liked it, and the reason why it was horror is because, one, I think horror is a great genre, and also because, stuff. So yeah, if you liked the video, thanks. Watch something else, I don't know.